Okay, good evening everyone. My name is Neil O'Connor. I'm a associate professor at University of Hong Kong. I want you to first think about tonight as this is your workshop rather than me just talking for 3 hours. If you let me do that, then you're going to go to sleep. Okay? Put your hand up if you've been to a workshop where someone just talks for 3 hours. How did you feel at the end of that? All right, you could be doing something better, I'm sure. Okay, there's many better things to be doing rather than listening to someone for 3 hours. So what I've got a special weapon. I have a special card. All right, how many of you have got my special weapon? This is a card. And if you haven't got the card, have you shown me? You want a card? Great. So I want you to write down 2 things on that card. How many? Christopher, thank you for coming. Thank you. 2 things on the card. First of all, what big question do you have for tonight? What question do you have? Would you like to have answered? Now maybe you have a very general question, but it's not specific yet because I haven't started talking and it'll become more specific. But at least put a general question on now, because that will help guide what I talk about later on. I want to collect the cards and we go through that when it's appropriate. When it's appropriate to talk about that, an answer to that question, then I can raise it. Then I know I'm talking about something that's specific to what you have in mind. Number 2, the second thing I'd like to write in your card now is, what is your number 1 challenge? What is your biggest challenge that you have? Okay? And it might be with respect to your company and how it's working with China and things like that. Okay? Or the challenge for information, a challenge to know what do we do next. Okay? So that will help me make the workshop more informative to you. The last thing you want is for me to talk for 3 hours. I can go all day if you like. So tonight's workshop is for you. So can you take 30 seconds to write on the card now a question that you have, a general question please. I really appreciate that. I'm going to cover a lot of things tonight. I've got material for 2 days to work on here. I'm going to talk about how Chinese suppliers manage their largest customers. I'm also going to talk about how, very briefly, how major buyers work with Chinese suppliers. And maybe the word manage is not a good word to use. Maybe manage has negative connotations, you know, that someone is dominating over someone else. So manage, we need to talk more in terms of a partnership. Look, tonight I'm going to talk about very quickly who I am in my work in China, the new landscape, that is, what is the new landscape of China? What is the new landscape for sourcing in China? How many of you are involved in sourcing in China or work with clients from China? Hands up. 1, 2. Only 2 people. Okay. How many of you are providing accounting services to clients who have operations in China? Is everyone CPA here tonight? I'm trying to get a response. You know, I asked a question in the Asia Sourcing Conference. Oh, is there anyone that has an accounting background here today? And no one put their hand up. So, does anyone have an accounting background here tonight? Okay, great. Okay, we've got a good starting point. We're good? All right, thanks, Curtis. We're good. All right. Yeah. Okay, Curtis, it's fine now. Thank you. Just leave it there. All right, so we're all good. I want you to know that I've been in Hong Kong for 16 years and that if you can just give me feedback, because I've done many workshops for CPA Australia, and so that will help me make the workshop more meaningful for you. At the end of the night, this is your workshop, not mine. Okay. So some of you, by now you've probably putting down a piece of paper some reason why that you're here tonight. Okay, what do you want to learn? Okay. Okay, so what I can do is provide you PDF copies of those handouts that you have after tonight if you want to have a record for tonight. And I have a website I can show you where the information can be gained. I want to talk about the supplier perspective. One thing we know a lot about, and it's very easy to find about, is the buyer perspective. If you're a buyer and you're sourcing from any country around the world, you can find out a lot of information. You can find out a lot of information about how to source from China, Alibaba, Made in China, DG Gate, global sources. There are so many portals out there that can give you access to thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of suppliers. If you know what you want, if you know what you want, if you know what product you want, you know what components you want, you can find it. It's so easy with the internet. Okay? My study isn't about that. My study is from the other end. My study is not from the supplier-buyer perspective, it's the supplier perspective. And what matters is if we understand the supplier more, okay, if we understand their challenges, then we're in a better position to help them. We're in a better position to work on a partnership with them. And some people may say, okay, we're a buyer, we want to know how best to manage our suppliers. Well, it should be the other way around. If you're a buyer, you want to work out how best to partnership with suppliers. The word partnership has that fairness connotation with it, rather than manage. That is, manage has that negative connotation. It's a Western approach to controlling one person controlling something else, one entity controlling another entity. All right, and so, but in Chinese, we're thinking in terms of partnership and relationship. So we're going to talk about what Chinese suppliers, what are their number one challenge, how they respond to that challenge. So if you're a buyer and you're sourcing from China, you're in a better position to work with the Chinese suppliers. You can help them. So if you can help them in many other ways rather than just giving them a better price, then maybe non-financially you can strengthen the relationship. Okay? Because there are many dimensions to business operations just across the border. Some of you probably know more about that. Right, I'm working in China, who I am, what I've done. So even before I started this China Supply 1000, how many of you know about China Supply 1000 project? No? Okay, so it's a crazy idea I had 2 years ago to, okay, I want to be the premier researcher on Chinese suppliers. And I looked at so many academic articles where they've hired consultants to go out and do surveys, or they've sent out surveys for the mail, they've done internet surveys, or they've hired people to go out and do interviews to a couple hundred firms. And I'm thinking, yeah, we learn a little bit like that, and then it gets published in a paper and no one ever reads it. And we know nothing. And there's nothing that's sort of like an ultimate source of information about what Chinese suppliers are doing. So I'm thinking, all right, I'll go and interview 1,000. If I interview 1,000, then industry will take notice, not just academia. And it's very important to bridge that divide between academia and industry. So then I can talk to you and give you value rather than just give you academic statistics. All right, because I've been doing that for the last 15 years and I don't want to do it for the next 15 years in Hong Kong. So it started when I ended up finishing a paper that I published in an academic journal, and that was all about how Chinese companies are competing domestically and internationally. And the reviewers asked me, oh, the statistics are very nice, you've got nice data, but it'd be very nice if you do some interviews. So I went and did some interviews, and I found out the following, that if a Chinese firm has a foreign firm as their number one customer or their major client that they're working with, then the foreign firms will put these pressures on them the most. That is, pressure to sell products at lower costs. And you're thinking, oh, that's nothing new, that's fine. Foreign competitors are viewed as a role model to copy management and marketing practices. Okay, and so I started to get hints from an academic content analysis of the interviews I did, and this is with 20 companies. I started to find that foreign firms that are buying or sourcing from China put these pressures on. Now, these are foreign firms that are actually set up in China already. They put this pressure. But if you're a foreign customer that is like Walmart overseas, they put margin pressure, formal contract stipulations, formal monitoring and training. And so these are two different types of foreign firms that Chinese companies may come up against. There's foreign firms that are already competing for domestic space in China. There are foreign firms that Chinese customers want to sell internationally too, and they're putting different pressures on the Chinese firm. And this was a very small interview study that I did, and I got this content analysis from that. Now I realised that, well, hang on, there's a bit more to what I'm doing here. I want to look at Chinese suppliers, how they feel about this pressure. We've got these foreign entrants and foreign customers putting these pressure on the Chinese suppliers. How do the Chinese suppliers respond? Guess what? They're going to manage down costs somehow. At the end of the day, the accounting has a big influence over the behaviour of these companies. And how do we manage down costs? We're either going to copy, we're going to outsource, get cheaper labour materials, or we're going to try and improve our process. Put your hand up if you think the first option is to improve processes. Hands up. Put your hand up if you think it might be the second or third or last option. Yes? All right. This is okay. You got to put your mind in the shoes of a Chinese company. Okay. You got pressure from foreign customers. You got pressure domestically. What are you going to do? Copy, outsource, cheaper labour, or process improvement? You might do 1, 2, and 3, and we know that that's been documented in the last 5 years. That has been done. Okay. So, and we know through toys, through milk, various other products of the problems that occur with that approach. Ultimately, if you can't work with your supplier and monitor them 24 hours a day, which most companies cannot do, how do you know they're not going to do 1, 2, and 3? How do you know that they're engaging in process improvement? Ultimately, you want them to help improve their process. And a good example is a major apparel retailer from Australia is working with 30 suppliers out of Shanghai to cut down this is in ladies and child's clothing. They want to cut down the product cycle time from initial stage of developing a new product of clothing to the final delivery to the store from 80 days down to 40 days. Wow, that's a very short, that's a big. How are they doing that? Are they doing that by just saying, well, if you don't deliver in 40 days, we're going to give you a penalty? Okay, that doesn't work. So what they're doing is working with, helping them, the suppliers install ERP system that will actually integrate with this with their buying office in Shanghai. And so they're actually working with the suppliers to actually help their management system to do that. So often as a buyer, and we have lots of bargaining power, we would like to just force the suppliers to do things, otherwise we won't order from them, otherwise we'll give them a penalty, and also thoughts of things like that. But that doesn't actually get you the process improvement that you need, because the big challenge for buyers is you delivering on time when you expect deliveries to be made. And there's so much uncertainty across the border in that deadline that you have, in meeting that deadline. There's so much uncertainty. That's the challenge. That's the big challenge for buyers, right? So I started out on interviewing 1,000 Chinese suppliers to find out, okay, if that's the buyer's challenge, then what's the supplier thinking on the other side? What is the #1 challenge? I'm interviewing 1,000 suppliers, specifically in the electronics industry, because it's one of the most important industries in China in terms of you've got the central government support, and you've got a huge ecosystem that's not going to get Vietnam, Cambodia, okay? And now Burma and India, that's the new landscape. So geographically, and I said, no, I'm not going to talk about that because I'm not expert on the other countries. Well, I'm not expert on China, but I know a little bit more. So I talk about what I know more about. And so I said to him, look, don't worry, I'm going to talk about the new landscape. Not geographically, but in terms of mindset, in terms of thinking. And so I presented the Chinese supplier view of the world, and that was the new landscape that I talk about. And that's what I mean about the new landscape, the supplier perspective. What is the supplier thinking? So if you think more about the supplier, you can help them. You see, over 12 months ago, the #1 challenge among Chinese suppliers, 2011, 166 of them said cost control was a big challenge. All right, so out of 166, we got 30% saying cost control. Great, and you're thinking, oh, that's fair. What's new here? Well, maybe some of you will think, well, maybe cost control should be more than 50% saying cost control is the #1 challenge. This is, at the end of an interview, we go for an hour and we're sitting face to face and we ask them, oh, so tell us, what is your #1 challenge? Okay, this is not on a survey, this is a face-to-face interview. What is your #1 challenge? Okay, only 30% say cost control. Okay, how many of you think cost is a big challenge in any business these days? You don't think so? You don't think costs are a big challenge?
Oh, it's a challenge, yeah.
Yes, it's a challenge in Hong Kong, it's a challenge all around the world. Okay, we know that, but only 30%. There are other issues. Okay, long-term issues not big, like paradigm shift, brand building. Okay, moving into something new. Okay, let's fast forward 12 months. Let's fast forward to 644. That is 12 months later, 644. What happens when we do 644? The problem is, with 644, is now we've got another 500 interviews, and now cost control is still a major challenge. Okay, now let's go back to the first one, competition. Where is competition? 7%. Now competition is 12%. You see the difference? Cost control hasn't changed. Now competition has become much a greater challenge. And that's really apparent in many industries you go for. I'll tell you a short story, what I mean by competition. We went to a touchscreen expo last November, and so we're interviewing this supplier, and we asked many questions. I can give you a copy of the survey after the workshop. We ask over 100 questions. It takes over an hour to do these interviews. And so during that process, we asked, and we focus the interview on the #1 customer, and we ask them, so what is your #1 customer? Okay, so what sales? That's great. How long have you been selling to this #1 customer of yours, your largest customer? They said, we started in August. That means, 3 months. Oh, okay, all right, that's great. So they make these touchscreen modules. What are we talking about? We're talking about these things here. They make something like this. Okay? Oh, great. What were you doing before August? Oh, we were making car seat mats in the auto industry. All right? And that's the nature of the business across the border, where you've got companies that say, oh, touchscreen manufacturing, oh, we can make 10% margin. Let's get the factory, get the machines in, and let's just start producing. And I think many of you are probably aware that the Western mentality is about, let's develop the product first, let's make sure it has the niche, make sure that we've done all our customer research, and then we go and market that product, make sure we have the distribution channel, make sure we have the branding, and then the customers will come by the truckload, right? Well, it's the other way around in China, where they say, we have a customer relationship. They are now they're shipping 30,000 of these per month starting in August. They were doing it for 3 months. Car seat mats before that, because they had this relationship with the major phone manufacturer in China. And how long they had that relationship? For 2 years. So in China, customer relationship first. They find out, what do they need? Oh, we can make that. But the customer doesn't know that they don't have the machines or the expertise, but they'll go and make it happen once they get relationship first and then product second. In the West, it's all about product first, the market research, and then then sell it, right? And it's the other way around. Have seen that many, many times in the interviews at these expos, and probably many of you realise, oh, yeah, we already know that. Put your hand up if you already know that. Okay, all right. Okay, so, all right, so we know there's 30% saying cost control challenge. What of those 30%, what are they doing about it? You see, the first question is, what is your number one challenge? The second question is more interesting. All right, if this is your challenge, what are you doing? Okay, if you know what Chinese suppliers are doing for this challenge, then you're in a better position to work with them. Look, out of the 183, there's only 14% automating, another 11% improving production efficiency, only 25%. Of all those companies that said cost control is the number one challenge, is doing something really radical to deal with that cost, to deal with that problem. Okay? Like those two things, automating, improving production efficiency, R&D, they are long-term radical changes, shifts in mentality, shifts in management. Right? What are the other 75% doing? Well, some of them will just increase market price, some of them will increase the amount of suppliers they source from, or source in term, we're talking about second and third tier suppliers in China, okay? So they're sourcing from materials. They buy from material suppliers. They'll buy from other things. Then they make something, make an electronic component, low resistor, capacitor, inductor, passive component, switch, cables, the whole range, and then sell it to these final assemblers like Foxconn, Pegatron, Flextronics. That goes on to Apple, HTC, and so forth, right? So there's your value chain there. But second and third tier suppliers, 30% cost control, 25% of them are automating and improving production. Not many of them are actually doing the automation or the production efficiency improvement. A lot of them are focused on the relationship, and so that's why I wanted to make a point with that. So if you're a buyer and working with these suppliers, yes, oh yeah, cost control, don't meet me down on price anymore, but then there's opportunities for, there's 75% of that sample saying cost control is a problem, that maybe they don't know how to automate, maybe they don't know how to improve their efficiency. And so that's one of the issues. I'll give you another example. 60% of all my samples say they have an ERP system. That means 40% don't. Okay, how many of you know what an ERP system is? ERP. Enterprise Resource Planning System. So it's not an extension. They all have accounting systems. It's an extension of an accounting system. Like the basic, they have Excel spreadsheet. Okay, that's a good start. Then you extend it further into an ERP system or a proper accounting system where you have checks and balances. So you have the separation of duties, and so you have different people in the organisation that have to put in a password to get access to the system, and then they can only get access to certain parts. So then you have an audit trail and it's auditable and all those sorts of things, right? So you've got the Excel spreadsheet, then you go up to an accounting system like KingGee, something like that, and then you've got ERP systems that go even further that help manage all the material flow through the organisation, plus accounting, plus everything else. 60% of an ERP system. How many of those 60% are using the full value of that? Most of them are not. Okay, they have the system, but they're not using it to its full extent. Okay, and you don't want to be like the one factory that I had privy to learn about. They bought, I think, one license of the KingGee software. This is a listed company. All right, so separation duties, you've got to have audits, things like that, right? They bought one license and gave that password to the 5 different areas that needed to be separated. Okay, you know, delivery and receipts, accounts payable, cash. All right, so everyone had access to every part of the whole system. Okay, and they didn't want to spend another 100,000 yuan to buy 5 licenses. So they have the separation duties, they have auditable books. That's common in China, that happens a lot. Okay, so mentality towards minimising system costs, or they don't find the full value of the system that's in place. So buyers can work with Chinese suppliers on these aspects. So we know cost control. What about competition challenge? Remember, that has grown. That was very small, but now it's very, very large. So those that have competition challenge, what are they doing? Well, 13% R&D, okay, and 3% relationship, 6% decrease the product price. All right, competition is very, very big, and later I'll show you a comparison, those that are on the eastern seaboard, those that are inland, which group have face more competition. Which do you think, eastern seaboard or inland? Let me repeat. I'm going to show you a graph later that compares the sample of suppliers on the eastern seaboard with the sample who are operating inland. Okay? Which group do you think finds competition as the #1 challenge? East? I think you might be right. Okay? And why? You're right, but why? Pardon?
Strong competition to try and crack.
Yes. Okay. Obviously, there's more competition in eastern seaboard. When you go inland, less competition. So I talk to the buyers, and I say, okay, you want to go inland to save labour costs, but now, if there's less competition, that works against you, right? Because now you have less alternatives. If one supplier doesn't work for you, you can't go to another supplier, but there's less suppliers to choose from. There's less alternatives. So there's other factors you've got to take into account. You go inland. Inland, everyone's talking about, oh, the next China is inland, right? Well, let's not so fast. Let's take into account all the factors. Labour cost is just one factor. There's many other factors. Competition, quality, logistics. So you've got to look at the whole gamut of factors for these major factory relocation decisions. All right, so productivity challenge. Those that found productivity and HR as an important challenge, as the #1 challenge, how they responded to that? Talent recruitment, improve employee welfare, employee training. That's a big thing. That's a big thing. There's a lot of employees moving. I talked to one factory in Shanghai that's only 5 weeks ago, and there's a Westerner, he speaks Chinese, and he's got a factory in Sichuan. I said, so how do you manage your employees? How do you get them to stay there? He said, you know, the latest thing I'm doing is every week we have an English hour where the employees will come in and he will talk to them and teach them some English and give them something that maybe other employers are not doing. And so you've got to be very creative in keeping employees, especially if you can't provide the market value. You know, that keeps on going up all the time. All right? Okay, so regional location differences. So where is the next China? Maybe. Let's go inland. Why? Because if we go inland, the labour costs are much lower, right? And there's some of the labour costs. This may be 6 months out of date, but notice Shaanxi, Qinghai, Sichuan, Xinjiang, all right, 680, 450, 530 respectively, compared to 1,300 Guangzhou, even more now, as the minimum wage costs, and it's even higher than that. Like Foxconn now is their lowest wages as over 2,000 yuan per month, even higher now. In Shenzhen, wages have been going up 15% every year for the last 6 years. So many of you are aware of that. Okay, so let's go inland, all right? But if we go inland, here are some of the acceptable quality levels that come out from, I got this from AsiaInspection.com, and this is across a whole range of industries, so it's not very specific. So if we're getting 65% of output that is acceptable, passing the acceptable quality limits, then we go inland, we've got 28%, 19, 21, 34, much lower. So you need to think about quality. So it's not, okay, let's think through this, okay? It's not the cost. You don't have to wear the cost of the low quality, right? Because then the supplier has to do it again. You with me on that, right? Right? But it's the disruption to your supply chain. It's the uncertainty. You thought you're going to fill 2 containers. Now you can only fill 1.